The 911 system is a lifeline for real emergencies, but for some people it's just a 24/7 customer service line for the mildly inconvenienced. We're talking about citizens who treat the police like their personal assistants or tech support. Today, we're counting down 55 of the most absurd, logic-defying calls that actually forced dispatchers to question their career choices. From lukewarm fries to menacing shadows, these stories prove that common sense is a lot rarer than we think. 1. A woman in Georgia was so offended by her cold French fries at a local drive-thru that she bypassed the manager and went straight to 911. She claimed the lukewarm potatoes were a crime against her wallet and demanded that the staff be taken into custody for intentional culinary negligence. When the dispatcher explained that cold food doesn't constitute an emergency, she argued that bad service is a threat to civil order. She eventually got a visit from the police, but instead of a refund, she received a citation for misusing the system. 2. In Oregon, a lonely heart decided that the local police department should double as a matchmaking agency. He dialed 911 to report that he was dangerously single and requested that an officer be dispatched to find him a decent, God-fearing woman who liked fishing. He argued that the state's responsibility for public welfare should naturally include his romantic life. If the police can help find a lost dog, he figured, why can't they find him a wife? What's the most desperate thing you've ever done to land a date? 3. A man in Florida called 911 because his roommate ate his leftovers. This wasn't just a sandwich. It was a premeditated attack on his nutritional security. He wanted the police to come and fingerprint the empty plastic container to prove the theft. He even suggested that since the leftovers contained expensive organic kale, it should be treated as a felony larceny rather than a simple domestic dispute. The dispatcher's long, silent pause on the line was likely the only moment of peace she had all day before dealing with the next genius. 4. Imagine being so impatient that you treat a red light like a hostage situation. A driver in Virginia called 911 because a traffic light had stayed red for over 3 minutes. He claimed he was being unlawfully detained by a machine and demanded an officer come and override the system so he could make it to his haircut on time. He genuinely believed that a malfunctioning sensor was a violation of his constitutional right to travel freely without government interference. Dispatch politely suggested he wait for the green or find a different route. 5. Technology is fantastic until it decides to stage a domestic uprising. A woman in California called 911 in a state of total terror because her robotic vacuum cleaner was hunting her. She claimed the Roomba followed her from the kitchen to the bedroom and was menacingly bumping into her ankles with malicious intent. She wanted an officer to come and apprehend the unit before it could escalate its attacks. She failed to realize the robot was just doing its job, trying to clean up the trail of crumbs she was leaving behind in her panic. 6. A man in New Jersey dialed the emergency line to lodge a formal complaint against his local library. His grievance? They didn't have the latest bestseller he wanted to read. He insisted that taxpayer-funded intellectual deprivation was a crime and that the librarian should be arrested for obstructing his education. He demanded that a squad car be sent to pick up the book from a different branch and deliver it to his house, as he considered this a critical knowledge emergency. The dispatcher, unsurprisingly, did not book him a ride. 7. A woman called 911 to report a suspiciously cheap garage sale. She was convinced that since prices were too good to be true, the event was a front for an international smuggling ring. She told dispatch that a $5 leather jacket was a red flag for organized crime and demanded a tactical team raid the driveway before the suspects fled. She argued civic duty required reporting any unnatural discounts that bypassed the standard rules of capitalism. 8. A woman in Ohio dialed 911 because she simply couldn't open a jar of pickles. After failing with hot water, rubber grips, and even a hammer, she decided her craving had officially become a medical and nutritional emergency. She requested that a strong, capable officer be sent to her kitchen to provide what she called mechanical intervention for the lid. She argued that as a taxpayer living alone, she was entitled to government assistance to ensure she didn't starve due to a vacuum-sealed jar of dill spears. 9. In what might be the most modern emergency ever, a teenager called 911 because his parents had changed the Wi-Fi password. He claimed that being cut off from the internet was a form of psychological torture and a violation of his human rights. He wanted the police to come and force his father to hand over the new code so he could finish his live stream. Surprisingly, the police did show up, but only to give him a very long lecture on what an actual emergency looks like. 10. A man in Illinois called the police to report his own shadow. He had been walking home after a long night at the bar and became convinced that a thin, dark figure was mimicking his every move. No matter how fast he ran or where he turned, the suspect stayed right with him. He was in a state of total panic until the responding officer pointed his flashlight at the ground and explained the basic physics of light and darkness to the very confused man. Is there a stupid fear you've had that you're now too embarrassed to admit? 11. A man in Kentucky called 911 because he had a vivid dream that his neighbor stole his lawnmower. He didn't even check his garage. He just woke up in a cold sweat and demanded an immediate arrest. He argued the dream's realism was proof of latent criminal intent and wanted the police to intervene before the dream became a reality. When the officer pointed to the mower in its usual spot, the man insisted the neighbor had snuck it back in while he was on the phone. Have you ever stayed mad at someone for something they did in your dream? 12. An Oregon woman called 911 because a spider was staring her down from the ceiling. She didn't want it squashed. She wanted it served with a formal eviction notice. She claimed the spider was a hostile squatter violating her right to a peaceful home and refused to enter the room until an officer escorted the 8-legged intruder off the premises. The dispatcher explained they don't have a pest control division, but she insisted her taxes paid for all forms of protection against creepy-crawly scouts. Would you call the cops for a giant spider or just burn the house down? 13. We've all felt the sting of a broken ice cream machine, but one Texas man took it to the legal limit. He called 911 because a local McDonald's was out of vanilla soft serve, claiming it was a consumer safety crisis. He argued he needed the ice cream to stabilize his internal body temperature on a hot day and demanded the manager be arrested for withholding life-saving dairy products. Dispatch had to explain that while a broken machine is a tragedy, it's not exactly a felony in the eyes of the law, even in the Texas heat. 14. In a suburban Massachusetts town, a man called 911 reporting he was being held hostage in his car by aggressive turkeys. He was terrified because the birds were pecking his tires and making threatening vocalizations. He requested a SWAT team or someone with a large net to neutralize the feathered insurgents. The dispatcher tried to stay professional while explaining the police don't usually handle high-stakes negotiations with poultry, but the man insisted his life was hanging by an organic thread. He genuinely thought the turkeys were professional hitmen sent to get him. 15. A woman in Florida called 911 because her dryer had stolen her favorite sock. She was convinced it wasn't just lost in the lint trap, but had been sucked into a different dimension by a defect in the machine. She demanded a forensic investigation into the manufacturer for creating a portal to another world without a city permit. When officers refused to dust the dryer for prints, she accused them of being in the pocket of big appliance. What is the weirdest thing you've lost that you're sure just vanished into thin air? 16. This next one is a special brand of stupidity. A man called 911 to report that the officer who pulled him over for speeding was actually a stripper in a convincing costume. His evidence? The officer was too handsome and had unusually white teeth for a public servant. He requested a real ugly cop be sent to verify the situation before he would show his license. He was shocked when the stripper called for backup and a second professional officer arrived to haul him away for obstructing justice and resisting a lawful order. 17. A Florida man called 911 to report a meteorologist for premeditated fraud after a sunny forecast turned into a wedding day downpour. He argued weather reports are legally binding contracts and demanded police handcuff the weatherman on air to show lying has consequences. He even offered the soaked wedding cake as forensic evidence of the crime. Have you ever been so let down by a forecast that you wanted someone held legally responsible for the rain? 18. A woman at a boutique grocery store called 911 because she found one bruised apple in a display of organic fruit. She didn't want a refund. She wanted the produce manager charged with public endangerment for selling emotionally distressing produce. She argued that since the store used the word premium in advertising, any imperfection was felony-level deception. She refused to leave until an officer photographed the bruise for her culinary trauma lawsuit. 19. A shopper in Florida called 911 because the Walmart pharmacy line was unconstitutionally long. She claimed her 15-minute wait constituted false imprisonment and medical neglect, and demanded police force the pharmacist to work faster. She genuinely believed the police department should act as her personal management consultants for retail efficiency. When the cops arrived, they weren't there to speed up her prescription. They were there to escort her out for trespassing and misuse of the emergency system after she refused to leave. 20. In Florida, a man called 911 because he found a threatening message in his bowl of alphabet soup. He claimed the letters DIE were floating together and that the soup company was sending him a targeted warning. He wanted a forensic team to analyze the broth for toxins and a protective detail placed outside his kitchen. Dispatch tried to explain the laws of probability, but he was convinced the noodles were part of a pasta-based conspiracy to take him out. What's the weirdest sign from the universe you've ever seen in something totally random? 21. A man in Arizona called 911 to report that his neighbor's lawn gnomes were monitoring his movements. He was convinced that the small plastic statues had rotating cameras in their eyes and were sending a live feed of his morning coffee routine directly to a local news station. He wanted the police to arrest the ornaments and bring a tech expert to dismantle the gnome-based surveillance network he believed was surrounding his property. He even claimed one of the gnomes had winked at him during a particularly heated argument about the property line. Have you ever felt like a piece of garden decor was judging your life choices? 22. In California, a man called 911 to report that his microwave was broadcasting his private thoughts to the local news station. He claimed that every time he heated up a burrito, the humming sound was actually a data transmission frequency. He wanted a technician from the FBI dispatched to his kitchen to shield his leftovers from federal surveillance immediately. He even offered to wrap his entire head in copper wire to prove he was being targeted by culinary espionage. Have you ever felt like your smart devices are definitely listening to things they shouldn't be? 23. A man in Florida dialed 911 to report a burglary in progress involving a very large, very confident raccoon. The raccoon hadn't broken into his house, but it was sitting on his porch, holding a single slice of pepperoni pizza it had snatched from his delivery box. The man insisted the raccoon was mocking him by eating it slowly while maintaining aggressive eye contact. He wanted the animal arrested for armed robbery, claiming the raccoon's sharp claws counted as a concealed deadly weapon. He seriously asked if the police had a tiny pair of handcuffs for the trash panda. 24. Imagine calling the police because your dinner was too aggressive. A woman in New York did exactly that when she ordered a spicy curry that was unreasonably hot. She didn't call the restaurant to complain. She called 911 to report an aggravated assault on her taste buds. She demanded that the chef be charged with poisoning the public and requested an emergency escort to the nearest fire hydrant to extinguish her mouth. Dispatch had to explain that too much cayenne is a culinary choice, not a criminal offense requiring a lights and sirens response. 25. A shopper in Ohio called 911 because a stray shopping cart in a parking lot rolled toward his luxury car with malicious intent. Even though the cart didn't actually hit his vehicle, he wanted it taken into evidence, and the grocery store manager charged with attempted property damage. He claimed the cart's movement was unnatural and suspected the store was using hidden magnetic fields to target expensive cars for repairs. What's the most ridiculous reason you've ever seen someone try to start a legal fight with a manager over something that didn't even happen? 26. A woman in Ohio called 911 to report that her cat was gaslighting her. She claimed the cat would meow to be let out, then immediately meow to come back in, creating a calculated cycle of emotional abuse designed to break her spirit. She wanted an officer to come and interrogate the feline to find out its true motives and connection to her ex-boyfriend. She seriously believed the cat was part of a psychological manipulation plot. What's the most manipulative thing your pet has ever done just to get exactly what they want? 27. In Nevada, a tourist called 911 because the mountains were in the way of his sunset photo. He wasn't joking. He wanted to know if the local authorities could temporarily relocate or shave down a specific peak that was blocking the perfect view from his hotel balcony. He argued that since the city relies on tourism, the natural landscape should be more cooperative with his social media aesthetic. The dispatcher was left wondering if the man thought the police department owned a giant pair of earth-moving tweezers for tourist convenience. 28. A man in Texas called 911 during a heated game of bingo at a local community center. He was convinced the caller was skipping his numbers on purpose to prevent him from winning the grand prize of a $50 gift card. He demanded a full forensic audit of the bingo balls and for the caller to be detained for racketeering and grand larceny. He even suggested the elderly woman next to him was a professional ringer sent to take him down. If you lost a high-stakes game of bingo, would you call the cops or just accept the loss? 29. A woman in a boutique dressing room called 911 because she believed the skinny mirrors were a form of consumer fraud. She claimed the mirrors were making her look too good, which she believed was a trap to force her into buying a $300 dress she couldn't afford. She wanted the manager arrested for visual deception and predatory marketing tactics. She stayed in the dressing room for over an hour, refusing to come out until the police arrived to document the reflection as evidence for her future lawsuit against the store. 30. A man in Florida called 911 because a stray cat was sitting on the hood of his car with a smug and condescending expression. He wasn't worried about scratches. He was genuinely offended by the animal's disrespectful attitude and calculated lack of fear. He requested an officer arrive to intimidate the feline and perhaps read it its rights before removing it from his driveway. He argued that allowing animals to look down on taxpayers was the first step toward a full-scale feline uprising in his suburban neighborhood and demanded the police restore the natural order. 31. A Michigan man called 911 to report a harassing cloud formation hovering over his property. He was convinced the large cumulus cloud looked exactly like his ex-wife and was loitering specifically to intimidate him. He demanded police use flares to break up the insulting resemblance, claiming the cloud had followed him from the grocery store in a clear case of atmospheric stalking. Dispatch had to explain that while the cloud might look judgmental, it didn't fall under their jurisdiction for restraining orders or harassment charges. 32. In California, a man called 911 because his neighbor was stealing his sunshine by planting a giant sunflower. He claimed the plant's height was an unauthorized energy blockade against his patio and demanded police arrive with a chainsaw to restore his solar rights. He viewed the flower's growth as botanical bullying and complained that its bright, cheery face was a mockery of his personal misery. The dispatcher asked if the neighbor was threatening him, and the man replied that the flower's unwavering optimism was a direct provocation. 33. A Georgia woman called 911 from a salon chair, hysterical because her new bangs were noticeably too short. She wanted the stylist arrested for aggravated assault with a pair of shears and permanent destruction of her dignity. She insisted police treat the salon as a crime scene to gather evidence for a lawsuit regarding wedding photos that weren't even scheduled for another 3 years. She refused to pay, claiming the stylistic catastrophe was a criminal breach of contract. Have you ever had a haircut so bad you genuinely considered it a criminal offense? 34. A pet owner in Florida called 911 because her goldfish, Goldie, was acting suspiciously lethargic. She was convinced the fish was staging a silent protest or had been poisoned by a neighbor's bad vibes through the glass. She requested a police escort to an emergency vet, but only if they used sirens to stimulate the fish's will to live through the heavy vibrations. The dispatcher informed her that fish-related depression is not a police matter, to which she replied that they were complicit in an aquatic tragedy. 35. A North Carolina man dialed 911 because a drive-thru worker didn't say thank you after handing him his burgers. He argued that extreme rudeness in a public role should be a misdemeanor and demanded an officer come to teach the teenager some manners. He claimed this lack of gratitude was a clear sign of societal collapse and needed immediate intervention before uncivilized behavior became the new law of the land. Dispatch suggested he write a review on Yelp instead of involving law enforcement in his etiquette lessons. 36. In a display of extreme botanical entitlement, a man in Washington called 911 to report a public nuisance in the form of a large oak tree in a local park. He was furious that the tree was dropping its leaves in an unorganized and messy manner, which he felt was a direct insult to his neat and orderly lifestyle. He wanted the city to issue a citation to the tree, or at least fine the Parks Department for allowing the vegetation to litter on public property. He argued that if he had to rake his own yard, the city should be legally forced to rake the entire forest. 37. In a display of technological frustration, an Ohio man called 911 to report his car's GPS for emotional harassment. He claimed the navigation system was taking the long way on purpose and laughing at him in a digitized tone during his commute. He wanted the police to issue a citation to the software for sabotaging his career out of pure digital spite. He genuinely believed the AI had developed a personal vendetta against him. What's the most personally offended you've ever been by a piece of technology? 38. A woman in Oregon called 911 to lodge a formal complaint against a rainbow she saw after a storm. She wasn't upset about the weather. She was furious that the colors were faded and unprofessional. She claimed the city was skimping on the atmospheric quality and demanded a refund on her local taxes since the natural display didn't look anything like the vibrant version on the postcards. She requested an officer come to document the lackluster spectrum as evidence of the city's declining standards of public beauty and visual malpractice. 39. An Oregon woman called 911 to complain about a hostile public bench in a city park. She claimed the wood was unnecessarily hard, and the lack of support was a direct violation of her human right to comfort. She demanded the Parks Department be arrested for architectural negligence and requested an officer bring her a tactical cushion from the station. She argued that as a taxpayer, the city was legally obligated to provide furniture that met her personal ergonomic standards. 40. A Connecticut man called 911 to report his mailman for birthday sabotage. He was furious because he received 5 bills on his birthday and not a single card with money. He was convinced the carrier was filtering his mail to ruin his special day and demanded the truck be searched for his missing presents. He argued that withholding joy should be a federal offense and demanded the carrier be interrogated immediately. Who's the villain in your life that you're absolutely convinced is out to ruin your day for no reason? 41. A woman in a rural area called 911 because there were too many stars, and she feared the atmosphere was leaking. She claimed the sky looked unusually crowded and wanted to know if the government added more stars without telling the public. She described the brightness as suspicious and worried the vacuum of space would suck her house into the void. Dispatch spent 10 minutes explaining how clear weather works before she finally agreed to close her curtains and hope for a cloudy morning. Have you ever been so overwhelmed by nature that you thought the world was ending? 42. In a high-end Los Angeles neighborhood, a woman called 911 to report theft of aesthetic property because influencers were filming on the public sidewalk. She claimed they were stealing the vibe of her architecture without paying a scenery tax, and demanded police seize their ring lights as tools of a criminal enterprise. She insisted her home's exterior was private intellectual property, and any unauthorized appearance was visual trespassing. Dispatch had to explain the vibe of the street was free for everyone. 43. A tourist at a national park in Washington called 911 to lodge a noise complaint against a massive waterfall. He claimed the thundering water violated the local noise ordinance after 10 at night and asked if rangers could turn the volume down during sleeping hours. He argued the attraction was behaving unprofessionally and ruining his vacation with an aggressive lack of volume control. Does the sound of nature soothe you, or is it just as annoying as a loud neighbor? 44. A Las Vegas man called 911 from a casino buffet after being asked to leave following a 5-hour eating marathon. He claimed the all-you-can-eat sign was a sacred legal promise, and cutting him off was breach of contract and targeted starvation. He demanded an officer enforce his right to more crab legs and wanted the manager arrested for theft of potential calories, claiming he was a victim of high-stakes food robbery. Dispatch suggested he find a new restaurant instead of involving law enforcement. 45. In a strict Illinois community, a resident called 911 because her neighbor was aggressively relaxing in a hammock on a Tuesday. She claimed seeing someone lie down during the workday was offensive to the neighborhood's work ethic and tanked property values. She wanted a citation for public indolence and for police to force the neighbor into productive yard work, believing visible laziness was a form of psychological harassment against taxpayers. 46. A North Carolina woman called 911 to report a suspicious transaction at a lemonade stand run by 2 children. She was furious they charged 50 cents for a small cup but $1 for a large one, calling it a predatory pricing scheme designed to manipulate consumer logic. She demanded police shut down the operation for violating fair trade laws, arguing that corporate greed starts on the sidewalk, and these kids needed a legal lesson from the authorities. 47. A Texas man called 911 to report animal disrespect because a neighbor's parrot mocked his cough every time he went outside. He claimed the bird was mimicking his respiratory issues as disability-based harassment and wanted the owner arrested for training a winged accomplice. He demanded the parrot be taken into custody for questioning regarding its sarcastic tone, which he felt created a hostile living environment. What's the weirdest thing a pet has ever done that felt like a personal insult? 48. An Arizona man called police to complain about his neighbor's dog. The problem? The dog wasn't barking. He found its silence ominous and calculating, and told the dispatcher that a quiet dog is clearly planning something. He viewed the silence as psychological warfare and wanted an officer to provoke the dog into a normal bark to prove it wasn't a biological drone or a trained assassin. The dispatcher suggested a hobby or a white noise machine before hanging up on what was easily the most Arizona call of the day. 49. In a display of extreme retail entitlement, a woman in Florida called 911 because a local thrift store refused to negotiate on the price of a used toaster. She claimed that the $5 firm price was a form of economic bullying and that the manager was extorting her by not accepting her offer of $3. She requested an officer come down and moderate the transaction to ensure her rights as a consumer weren't being violated by the store's unyielding and aggressive pricing strategy. Dispatch had to explain that the police department doesn't provide a bargain-hunting backup service for Saturday morning shoppers. 50. While hiking in a national park, a tourist called 911 to report a broken mountain. He was upset that the trail he was on was unnecessarily steep and didn't have an escalator or a paved walkway. He argued that the lack of modern accessibility features on a rugged wilderness trail was a safety hazard and demanded that the park rangers be investigated for gross negligence. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed to think the entire planet should be customer service friendly? 51. A man in Ohio dialed 911 because his remote control stopped working mid-football game. He claimed the cable company was infringing on his constitutional right to entertainment and demanded a police escort to the provider's office to force a reboot. He argued that missing a crucial third down play was a national emergency for his mental health. When dispatch told him to change the batteries, he accused them of being in cahoots with the media elite. Have you ever been so frustrated with technology that you wanted to call in a SWAT team just to fix your Wi-Fi? 52. A woman in California called 911 to report a public display of rudeness by a crosswalk sign. She was offended that the hand signal was dismissive, and the countdown timer created unnecessary existential dread. She demanded an officer come and recalibrate the sign to something more supportive and less demanding. She genuinely believed the city was using hostile architecture to ruin her morning walk and stayed on the corner for 20 minutes, waiting for the police to arrest the signal for its aggressive body language and lack of manners toward pedestrians. 53. Police in Illinois were dispatched to a grocery store after a man claimed he was being harassed by a vegetable. He found a piece of Romanesco broccoli, the kind that looks like a neon green fractal, and was convinced it was alien technology designed to hypnotize him. He wanted the produce department cordoned off as a crime scene and a hazmat team to analyze the biological weapon. It took 2 officers to explain it was just a cauliflower relative, though the man still left wearing a makeshift tinfoil hat. What's the weirdest looking food that made you do a double take? 54. A man in Pennsylvania called 911 to report a reverse burglary that has to be the weirdest crime report in history. He claimed that while he was at work, someone broke into his apartment, but instead of stealing his TV or jewelry, they meticulously cleaned his entire kitchen and folded his laundry. He wasn't grateful. He was absolutely terrified, calling it a hostile act of domestic psychological warfare. He demanded that the police dust for fingerprints on his freshly scrubbed countertops to find the cleaning culprit, before they decided to strike again with a vacuum. 55. To wrap things up, a man in Pennsylvania called 911 to report a theft of his own common sense. After calling the police to complain that his pizza didn't have enough pepperoni, he realized how ridiculous he sounded. He stayed on the line to turn himself in for being a nuisance, hoping that a preemptive confession would get him a lighter sentence from the stupidity court. The dispatcher thanked him for his honesty before giving him a very real warning about misusing emergency services. Sometimes, the only person you can blame for a 911 call is the one in the mirror. These 55 stories are a sobering reminder that common sense has officially left the building. Dispatchers deserve a massive raise, and probably a long vacation, for staying professional through this level of madness. From reporting aggressive sunshine to suing a goldfish for being bored, we've witnessed the absolute peak of human absurdity today. Now, be honest. Which of these 55 callers was the absolute dumbest? Tell us your pick in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on the weirdest stories from across the country. Let the debate begin.